My girlfriend and I recently moved into our dream home, a perfect fit for us and our rescued cat, Bella. Everything felt idyllic upon moving in, except for the house to our immediate right. It was an unfinished renovation project, seemingly abandoned. The back gardens of both houses were directly adjacent, with no fence separating them. The previous owner had started to replace the old fence but never finished, leaving a completely open access point between our properties. Behind the abandoned house, separated by a fence this time, lived a group of young men. We'd occasionally see them cutting through the abandoned property's garden to reach the street. Initially, we didn't give it much thought, assuming they perhaps knew the owner. However, our first night in the house took a decidedly unsettling turn. While relaxing in our back garden, we noticed a man staring blankly at us from a window in the house behind the abandoned one. He wasn't discreet. His gaze was unnervingly direct and prolonged. The room was dark, amplifying the already unnerving situation. The lack of expression on his face was particularly disturbing. We initially dismissed it as simple curiosity from a new neighbor, but after a half hour of this intense, emotionless stare, we retreated indoors. The following days were unremarkable, filled with the usual unpacking and settling in activities. But our second evening in the garden took a more overtly confrontational turn. As we enjoyed the night sky and conversation, we heard the flimsy wooden fence between the gardens shifting. 3 men emerged, silently observing us. Feeling compelled to acknowledge their presence, I asked, "Are you okay?" The youngest, perhaps 29, carried a large bag of indeterminate contents. He offered us stolen washing-up tablets, which we politely declined. The whole exchange was so surreal that I attempted to lighten the mood with a joke. He smiled and simply said, "Okay," before they departed. What unnerved me was their blatant intrusion into our garden without so much as a greeting, as if they possessed an inherent right to be there. We initially assumed it was a one-time event, but the incidents escalated rapidly. They began entering our garden with increasing frequency, their actions becoming increasingly intimidating. They accessed the abandoned house by lifting the broken section of fence. My girlfriend and I are both 20 years old, and the thought that these men were attempting to intimidate 2 young women was immediately apparent. One afternoon, while I was cleaning, 2 police officers appeared, entering the abandoned garden by lifting the broken fence and briefly inspecting the area before departing without explanation. It struck me as odd, but I dismissed it, assuming it was related to the residents of the house behind us. A few days later, the police knocked on our door. They informed us that the house behind us was now vacant. Its occupants had been evicted due to antisocial behavior, not only directed at us but also towards other neighbors. While relieved that they were gone, we remained unsettled by the incident. Our sense of unease wasn't over. While I was bathing, a loud bang outside jolted me. I quickly dressed and found my girlfriend recording something from the spare bedroom window overlooking the now empty house's garden. She shushed me and after a moment explained what she had captured. A previously unseen man pointed at our bedroom window, then sprinted towards our house, attempting our door handle before running back to the empty house, throwing the already damaged fence sections around and banging on the windows. We immediately contacted the police, who reviewed the video, took a statement, and departed. The incident left us deeply shaken. Why would he try our door handle and then proceed to vandalize the abandoned house? What were his intentions? A few nights later, the unsettling events continued. At 2:16 a.m., we heard a lewd whistling, the kind typically used to harass women. This was followed by tapping on our window. Terrified, we checked our security cameras, but oddly, they hadn't recorded anything. The noises ceased shortly after. Too afraid to sleep, we sought refuge at my mother's house. Upon our return the next morning, we discovered our Ring doorbell had been removed and placed on the ground, the SD card missing. The culprit was obvious. Who else would have done this? We reported this latest incident to the police, who advised us to keep all doors and windows locked, adding that the removal of the camera could indeed indicate a more serious threat. Their honesty, while alarming, was appreciated. The whistling, banging, and attempted entry continued for weeks, prompting multiple police reports. Although they never attempted to enter our house again, the fear persisted. 3 weeks later, while reviewing footage from our relocated indoor camera, we witnessed a disturbing scene. A masked man, his face concealed and his hood up, stood in our garden, arms outstretched in a grotesque imitation of Jesus on the cross. He stared intently at our bedroom window, his head tilted. Frozen with fear, and because the camera's position made recording impossible, we failed to even capture a screen recording. He then spoke, though we couldn't decipher his words. He then walked to the opposite side of the street, and stood there, staring at our house for approximately 30 minutes. Again, the police response was dismissive, claiming that staring at someone's property wasn't illegal. Their dismissal only amplified our fear and anxiety. Sleep became a luxury. Every external sound filled us with dread. Then, at 2:52 a.m., a notification alerted us to activity outside. I woke my girlfriend, urging her to check the camera. The image we were confronted with was terrifying. 2 masked men approaching our house from the side, their flashlights trained on our windows. One of them, the same man who'd been harassing us, carried what appeared to be a crowbar. The question echoed endlessly, why us? What was their purpose? The man's continued harassment involved pointing, waving, and shouting up at our window. Each time we looked, he met our gaze with that same unnerving, blank stare. The police, despite multiple reports and video evidence, offered minimal assistance. The harassment persists, captured on our cameras but seemingly beyond the reach of law enforcement. Even earlier today, he was again standing outside, staring up at us. The video evidence is recorded, but the sheer terror remains. We will update if further events occur. Music. Let me preface this by stating that I am not delusional. I know how this sounds, paranoid, unhinged, even crazy, but I swear, every detail I am about to recount is true. It began with faces, or rather, a series of faces that all felt slightly off. 3 months ago, I ended a 2-year relationship with my ex, Caleb. The breakup was long overdue. Caleb wasn't physically abusive. He never struck me. However, his control was insidious and calculated, a subtle but devastating form of manipulation. He tracked my phone usage, quizzing me on my daily activities to detect inconsistencies. After leaving him, I took drastic measures. I changed my phone number, deactivated my social media accounts, and even moved apartments. I believed I had successfully severed all ties. Then came the barista. It was a Tuesday morning. I stopped at a small coffee shop near my new apartment, a place I'd only visited a couple of times. As I approached the counter, the barista, a young woman around my age, greeted me with, "Good morning, Sunshine." I froze. Sunshine was Caleb's sarcastic nickname for me, used particularly when I was upset. It wasn't a common expression. I initially dismissed it as coincidence. However, the pattern continued. A few days later, my rideshare driver, an older man, glanced at me in the rearview mirror before asking, "Ever figure out what you're running from?" Caleb had used that exact phrase after I'd mentioned needing time for self-discovery. This unsettling repetition continued. A woman at the grocery store whispered, "You don't get to just disappear." A man on the street commented on my hairstyle. A coworker hummed a song Caleb played during our arguments. It wasn't their faces that disturbed me, but the unsettling familiarity in their eyes, the knowing looks, as if they recognized me or, at least, believed they did. Each face was different, yet the expressions in their eyes were identical. The escalating incidents led me to believe I was losing my mind. I resorted to a desperate act, contacting Caleb indirectly, messaging his sister, begging her to tell him to stop. I suspected he'd hired a private investigator or was orchestrating this campaign of harassment. She responded the next day, denying any knowledge of my claims. She subsequently posted a photo of Caleb in rehab, looking gaunt and pale, holding a "one-day sober" chip. This seemingly exonerated him. Yet, the feeling of being watched, of strangers knowing intimate details about my life, remained. One night, I stayed late at work, unwilling to return to my apartment. Around 10 p.m., I walked home, keeping my head down and headphones in, listening intently for any sign of being followed. Upon turning the corner onto my block, I saw a young man sitting on the stoop of the building opposite mine, his hood up, his gaze fixed on the ground. He said, "Cold out tonight, huh, sunshine?" I walked past without responding. Back in my apartment, I secured every lock and spent hours listening to the silence. The next morning, my doormat was overturned, with a message scrawled on the underside. "You can change your face too if you want, but I'll still recognize you." I felt physically ill. I immediately booked a hotel room for the weekend, leaving my apartment without packing anything. The hotel room, a small, quiet space on the 4th floor, felt safe until 2 a.m., when 3 slow knocks sounded on my door. I peeked through the peephole. A woman, her face blank and expressionless, stared at the door. She said nothing, and eventually left. It was then that a chilling realization dawned on me. These weren't random people. They were being fed information, specific phrases and details from my past relationship with Caleb. If it wasn't Caleb directly, who was behind this? The thought of Caleb's obsession with control, his need to maintain a presence in my life even after the breakup, solidified a terrifying suspicion. He didn't need to be the one carrying out the harassment. He merely needed to orchestrate it. I recalled a conversation months before the breakup, where Caleb had mentioned an online forum he participated in, a group discussing tactics, which he framed as self-improvement strategies. I can't recall the forum's name, but looking back, it seemed like a sinister, cultish activity. I believe someone, most likely Caleb, has hired individuals to use his words, mimic his patterns, ensuring a constant reminder of his presence in my life, even from afar. It isn't traditional stalking, it's psychological graffiti, a persistent reminder that he'll always be watching. I moved again, deactivated social media once more, and dyed my hair. I also informed my friends not to share my location. This worked until last week, when a woman on the street passed me by saying, "Still hiding behind books, sunshine. I don't believe this will ever stop." Perhaps he contracted a shadowy underground service for a year-long campaign of harassment. Or perhaps this has become a morbid game, a competition to see who can most effectively scare me. I can no longer trust anyone's face. The constant paranoia is slowly destroying my mental health. Music. My family, a group of homebuddies, was surprised when my aunt suggested a trip to one of Michigan's Great Lakes. We eagerly accepted, hoping to forge new memories together. My cousin booked a spacious Airbnb that miraculously accommodated all 18 of us. The house was beachfront, boasting stunning lake views stretching to the horizon, almost ocean-like in their vastness. Most of us were assigned rooms in the main house. However, due to our large group size, some of us, including myself and 3 cousins, were accommodated in a 2-story garage situated behind the main house. Initially, we didn't mind. We spent the first day enjoying the hot tub, the beach, and the breathtaking scenery. It wasn't until nightfall that we really explored the garage. The space was severely outdated and neglected. Carpeted bathrooms reeked of mold, bed linens were stained, and the door latch was poorly secured. It was evident that the cleaning crew had focused solely on the main house, ignoring the garage entirely. My cousins were disgusted and refused to sleep on the beds without fresh sheets, prompting me to suggest doing laundry. The washing machine was small, accommodating only one set of sheets at a time, ensuring a late night. We spent time upstairs, waiting for the first load. My cousin Maria complained about our less-than-ideal lodging, and as she spoke, a deep unease washed over me, a premonition of something ominous. I've experienced this feeling before, a rare but chilling intuition preceding nightmares or worse. I warned my cousins to remain vigilant, a caution born from a previous break-in at our old Detroit home. Around midnight, the washing machine signaled the completion of the first load. I went downstairs alone, transferred the laundry to the dryer, and brought up the freshly laundered sheets. Seeing the clean sheets, my cousins wanted their own bedding washed as well. I continued the back-and-forth laundry cycle for everyone. By 2:37 a.m., we were finally done. We made the beds, exhausted from our late-night chore. My cousin Nikki insisted on leaving the lights on. While they quickly fell asleep, I remained awake, working on school assignments on my phone. I'm a light sleeper, a habit formed after the break-in, always hyper-aware of my surroundings even while drowsy. Then, around 3 a.m., a deafening bang shook the garage door, as if someone had thrown their weight against it. I sat up, startled, but my cousins remained asleep. I tried to rationalize it as wind, but the impact was far too forceful. I remained quiet, attempting to resume sleep. But the bang repeated, even more violently, the entire garage shuddering from the impact. I was fully awake, watching my sleeping cousins. No animal or wind could have generated such a forceful noise. 20 minutes later, a third, equally powerful boom echoed, the garage shaking again. Finally, 2 of my cousins awoke. I asked if they'd heard it, already knowing their answer. Nikki questioned the source of the noise, and I replied that I didn't know, but it was the third instance, and wind couldn't possibly be responsible. Nikki suggested texting her mother, my aunt, which we did. At 4:11 a.m., my aunt responded, recognizing the gravity of the situation. She woke my uncle, who rushed outside to investigate. We remained upstairs, paralyzed with fear, until we heard knocking. It was my uncle, accompanied by my father and several older male cousins. This signaled the escalation of the situation to a serious level. There was no wind, no pranks, this was real. My uncle instructed us to pack our belongings and move to the main house. He mentioned someone was on the property, a statement that sent a chill down my spine. I quickly packed, and we rushed out of the garage. Upon entering the main house, most of the family was awakened by the noise. We gathered in the living room, attempting to make sense of the events. I recounted the first 2 bangs, my cousins confirming the third. My aunt explained that when my uncle went outside she followed him. He'd shouted, "Hey!" at someone standing behind the garage. At that moment, the main house door slammed shut, despite the absence of any wind. Fearing someone might have entered the house, she ran to wake my father and cousins. A thorough search revealed no intruders. My uncle then described what he had seen, a man standing silently behind the garage, staring intently as if he wanted to be seen. When my uncle called out, the man didn't react, simply walking away and vanishing, not into the shadows, but seemingly into thin air. There were no crunching leaves, no footprints. My uncle, a serious and logical man, is not one to fabricate stories. This made the incident all the more terrifying. My brothers later discovered 2 jester cards, one in the main house and one in the garage. The garage card was twisted and demonic-looking. One cousin noted that jesters symbolize mockery, and the noises occurred around 3 a.m., the so-called devil's hour. It felt as though we were being deliberately taunted. My uncle checked for footprints, finding only his own and my cousin's, not the man's. Another cousin drove down the road, attempting to spot anyone fleeing, but found no one. That day, no one returned to the garage. We crammed into the main house, sleeping on floors and couches. My mother gave up her bed for our comfort. On the second night she slept on a couch near the large windows, awakening around 4 a.m. to footsteps on the porch. Afraid to open her eyes, she listened as someone attempted to open the basement door. The door rattled, indicating a forced entry attempt, with my brothers and male cousins sleeping inside. My mother rushed to the basement, but upon reaching the beachside entrance, no one was there, and the boys were all still asleep. That was our final night. Though we planned to stay until Tuesday, we left on Monday. On the drive home, we couldn't stop discussing the events. My mother, learning that I'd been going downstairs alone during the laundry, theorized that someone might have been watching me, believing I was alone in the garage. The timing between my last trip downstairs and us going to sleep was suspiciously aligned with the banging noises. Theories began to abound. A few of us suspected it was a neighbor trying to intimidate us. Others, however, felt there was something supernatural about it, particularly given the presence of those jester cards. My aunt correctly pointed out that a normal person, upon being discovered by my uncle, would have fled. This individual, though, simply observed us and then vanished without a trace. We contacted the Airbnb host, who assured us she would review the security footage from the camera positioned above the garage door, but we never received a response. This lack of communication left us wondering if she knew the man. Was he perhaps a local resident? Upon our arrival, my sister and cousin took a walk along the beach and passed a woman at the neighboring property. She gave them a chilling, unfriendly stare, no greeting, no friendly gesture, just a cold, unsettling gaze. The house was quite isolated, and we understood how the constant influx of Airbnb guests could potentially irritate the local community, but we made a conscious effort to be respectful. We certainly didn't deserve the unsettling experience we had. This was our first family vacation, and hopefully, despite everything, it won't be our last.